Okay, there's Clyde and Michael. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone, and we'll add in the others that join in as we move along here. But just to respect everyone's time, we'll get started. So I'm Paul Holtus with the World Ocean Council, and happy to have all of you here as we continue with our Ocean Investor Roundtable and moving forward and really getting into the development of the ESG impact framework discussion. So what I'd like to do, and we are recording, so we do record these to help then be able to prepare follow-up notes as necessary. We, I hope, as mentioned, everyone has received the slide deck, and as usual, we do like to allow new participants to introduce themselves, or if you haven't participated for a while or had a chance to introduce yourself previously. So without any particular order, those of you that are new to the roundtable, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, or just go ahead and jump in and unmute and introduce yourselves, just a minute or two on who you are in your organization and your interest in investment in the sustainable blue economy. So Rafa, I'll go ahead and pick on you first, since we had a chat the other week, and I know you're quite keen to be here. You're a bit backlit, but I think we can see you. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for inviting me here, and hi everyone. I'm really pleased to meet you. My name is Rafa. I'm in the financial industries for 16 years, and since roughly 11 years, very passionate about sustainable investing, in particular in water markets or everything related to water. And currently I'm working for a ESG research and advisory firm called Veritas. And I would be most happy to collaborate with you in this new ESG framework for the ocean economy, and very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rafa. Very good. Anyone else? Shali, I'm not sure you've been here before, or sorry, go ahead, Robin. Yeah.
No worries. I'm representing a startup called Flinder. Maybe a little bit a different approach to blue economy is that we invest in mangrove projects, mangrove restoration projects around the world, currently in Myanmar and Kenya. And yeah, I'm situated in Austria right now, and we are very keen to participate and learn from the council.
Great, Robin. Yep. Very good to have you here.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, let me introduce myself as well. I work with Paul and Fred Sullivan on Blue Ocean Exchange. I've been working on that with him for a while now. My background is I'm an analyst, and primarily my experience has been in investment banking and financial derivatives. And I was also the risk manager for a futures exchange for about 4 or 5 years. So, and I've become interested in the sustainable ventures because it relates in some capacities to financial instruments, especially with carbon credits, and they're recently being launched on various exchanges. And it's a whole new world to me. So I'm learning a lot, and the learning curve is very steep. So I feel like I'm getting a lot out of it. And my background had been previously primarily involved with interest rate related products and foreign exchange. So this is a whole new world to me. So anyway, nice to meet everybody, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ed. Great to have someone with your depth of experience here. Others that would like to introduce themselves? Yeah, Maggie, great. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Paul. My name is Maggie Freed. I am the head of the Ocean Seafood and Aquaculture Investor Consortium at CREO Syndicate. CREO is a nonprofit organization that's a network of primarily family offices, but some affiliated funds that are investing in areas related to combating climate change and promoting sustainability. And I lead a pilot project that we launched last year, which is this consortium that I mentioned. It is a group of 25 family offices and affiliated funds and growing that are investing in sustainable oceans, aquaculture, and seafood. We have a goal of deploying $250 million of capital into these sectors over a 3-year period and hoping to catalyze $2 billion of institutional capital further down the line. So very much looking forward to hearing what other people in this space are thinking about and areas that they find interesting and the barriers and challenges that they're finding as well.
Great, Maggie, really good to have you and CREO here. Other introductions?
Paul?
So Shali, go ahead.
Go on.
Hi, everybody. Shali Shankar, a founder and managing partner of AIM Partners Fund. We are a private equity fund and we invest in technology companies that are addressing climate change through the oceans, so very ocean focused. We have 14 investments. We just had one exit recently, and we invest in aquaculture, sustainable aquaculture and fisheries, replacement to plastics and replacement to other minerals that are mined in the oceans and other issues around the ocean. So really good to be here and look forward to getting to know more people.
Great, thanks, Shelley. Have we missed anyone in terms of new? Sorry, I see hands up. So now things that my screen just moved on. Neil, I think you're ready to jump in.
Actually, I'm going to let Sasha go first. I'll go straight after him, my colleague.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Sasha Wiese, Neil and Ivy are from a company now called Bankers Without Boundaries. So basically, we are a bunch of former investment bankers with 15, 20, 25 years experience. I'm from structuring, worked for Credit Suisse and Barclays over the last years in global markets divisions. And at Bankers Without Boundaries, we are dedicating our abilities and skills towards a sustainable financing in all shapes and forms. And blue economy is one of the core areas we are looking into right now. We are developing smart financial solutions like biodiversity bonds and other investment techniques in order to channel investments at scale into this area.
And if I can follow up on that. So my background is investment banking very early on at Goldman Sachs and UBS, but most of my life I've been an entrepreneur and a venture capital investor. And my focus on this is really Africa and global, whereas Sasha leads up the European side.
Great, really good to have gotten in touch with both of you recently and had a chat with Sasha, and so good to have you here. And leave Monica.
Thank you very much, Paul, and good to meet you all. My name is Liv Monica Stubholt. I practice law in the law firm Selmer in Oslo, Norway. I'm also, of course, delighted to say as my primary credit in this meeting is that I'm on the board of World Ocean Council and have been for a few years. And that springs out of my enthusiasm for the legal dimension of sustainability, and particularly with regard to healthy and robust world oceans. I've for also decades worked with investors into the seafood industry particularly, but not only aquaculture and fisheries. And I've come to change my worldview when I work as a legal practitioner from only looking at the business itself to now look at them more and more with an investor lens. So the majority of my clients are investors into natural resources, be that energy or seafood industry. Leave it at that, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Monica. So it's great to have so many new faces here, and we've also want to carry forward with the continuity, and had the timing for this month's call was, excuse me, a little bit challenging for some of our regular participants, and so we have we're going to be setting a regular monthly sort of plan here, so that we don't have to kind of so that people can put this on their calendars for regular slot as we move forward, and hopefully then facilitate the continuity with participation that we've had pretty well developed over the last 12 months or so. I think that, unless I've missed someone, any other hands up on new participants? I think not. So with that, maybe to really get into today's session, we have, as you know, well, those of you that are new, you've seen from the slide deck, the focus here then is on this real working area of developing, following through on the priority that had emerged from the meetings over the last 12 months or so, as the group got to know each other and really identified a couple of priorities, one of which was creating more understanding in the investment community, particularly the institutional investment community, of the needs and opportunities for investing in the blue economy and sustainable development for the ocean, and working to create that outreach and awareness raising with the larger components of the investment community to help then bring resources to those of you that are working to develop or have developed funds to really focus more specifically on the blue economy or particular sectors such as sustainable aquaculture. So that's one area. The other area, and so we're still exploring how to best move forward with that. And I am excited to say in the next month or two, we will have representatives from some of the major pension funds and sovereign wealth funds participating in the roundtable to help us really start to understand each other better and really see where their interests and priorities are from the major institutional investors. The other priority topic action area that emerged then was working to develop the ESG framework and impact investing framework. And that's where we have been wanting to move into that. We've had a series over the last few months of excellent speakers, including last month from Pierre Rousseau from BNP Paribas. We had Marissa Drew from Credit Suisse. We had the Blue Invest, the EU, the European Commission Blue Invest platform. And we had a very good panel in November of ocean deal making that we had a lot of great feedback on that. But we do want to move into this real operational action area. And let me open the slide deck here and share screen with everyone. And I hope everyone can see that. And again, for those of you that joined late, we do record these events. And I'll leave it the view if this works because it's easier to navigate to the slides without the full screen, because then I lose everyone's sight of everyone. And so just before we get into that, just to mention that we do also invite those participating in the Ocean Investor Roundtable to our monthly roundtable on ocean restoration and CO2 removal, and that will be in a couple of days at this same time. And so I'll send out a follow-up notice on that for those of you that are interested in that, and very active, exciting developments there in that hugely important area of investment and business development for carbon dioxide removal and the ocean. We did send out item 4 here a week or 10 days ago, an investor survey. This has come up from a number of you over the months, and Michael Van Niekerk, who's here on the call, and Cynthia Yagi, who couldn't make it today, worked to develop the survey that all of you should have received. I don't know, Michael, do you want to say a few words about that? I think we'll be waiting until we get a few more responses before we can pull together some synthesis on that and present it at the next roundtable meeting or the following one. But if you had any thoughts you wanted to share on that, Michael.
Yeah, I think you really captured it there, Paul. There's not much more to say, but
Okay.
we're really just trying to understand where people's interests lie, because we come from so many different sectors and so many different parts of the world, and getting a sense of, one, what you know about where the best opportunities are and where most of the activity is, but also to get a sense of where people's interests are. So we thought it would just be useful to get a sense of that from a broad, diverse group of people. And then, as Paul says, we'll feed it back, and so everyone has a sense of that. And that might steer, I guess, to some extent, the agendas going forward, but I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. And so it really is a part of helping build this sense of community of practice and working together to help create a sort of common sense of direction and opportunity where that's valuable for folks. And then there may be specific partnerships or alliances that emerge where people have interest in similar geographies or sectors or subsectors. Okay, and then within that, within that context, this common interest that has emerged on understanding and developing the framework, and this has really been consistent with and aligned with what we've been seeing at the World Ocean Council over the last number of years as we engage more and more since 6 or 8 years ago with the investment community, that there are a range of sort of impact frameworks and blue investment and blue finance frameworks that have been emerging. And as the different entities involved in the roundtable and going back to our Sustainable Ocean Summit in 2019, it had a major focus on, in that year's edition of the Sustainable Ocean Summit, major focus on investment and finance for the blue economy, really seeing that a lot of people were working to create this architecture and doing great work on it, but slightly different versions from different funds and firms and organizations. And so what emerged in last year's roundtables sessions was the real need, opportunity, and value of having a more common framework, as articulated on this slide, and that this would be of value to institutional investors. I would say, Maggie, I think the family office side and others that are getting involved in the blue economy to have a set of metrics that are developed by and for the actual blue economy specialist investors would really help solidify this sort of community of practice and create the basis for better, more solidly moving forward. This is where we're at now, really, and we'll get into the meat of this in the next few slides. I did want to also mention that there are, as part of this process, we have been, with input from a number of you and through our own outreach from the WOC side, been connecting with some of the broader framework and structures and systems out there to see if, how, when, and where they are looking at the ocean industries. And so give you one example of that, the Global Impact Investment Network, GIN, which most, if not all of you, are familiar with. And they have the IRIS program, the IRIS Plus initiative, which is working to create sets of metrics around different sectors and different issues. I've been in touch with them, and they they've been doing great work, and there are a number of, I'm just using that as an example, there are a number of other structures and processes out there. What we want to do is create work and outputs from the ocean investment ecosystem that can be consistent with and feed into those broader structures. And so back to this example from the GIN IRIS Plus, they are aware of the need and opportunity for for developing the work on the ocean side of things, but it's not, they don't plan to get to it for another couple of years. And so in my discussions with them, we've talked about them. Well, if there is a group of investors that's ready to move on this now through the platform, the Ocean Investment Platform and Roundtable at the World Ocean Council, that'd be great if we could keep moving this forward and aggregate, consolidate, synthesize the work into an investment community developed and led composite framework. So this is there's a lot of interest in having us move forward with this, us meaning collectively the ocean blue economy investment community, and then being able to do that in such a way that it feeds into these other processes. So we've been working forward to this point of getting clear on who's interested in this, having if it's not everyone around the round table that's got the more sharply defined interest, to get a smaller working group together and putting forward where we want to go with this to the broader roundtable. So we're kind of at a hybrid of those first two bullets right now into the third bullet here, presenting an outline scope of work. And I have to really thank Michael van Niekerk for all the time and effort he's put into this. And so he and I will be walking through this today with you to get your feedback on the structure and process here. But let me pause here for any feedback on kind of the overall context, linking this effort into the bigger the investment frameworks, ESG and impact investing frameworks out there, or any other of this kind of background and overall context, if there's any comments or questions about where we're at and where we're going.
Is the UNPRI one of those other frameworks that you're looking at, or is that relevant to this scenario?
Absolutely. And Malcolm, if for when people first intervene, maybe get name and address. Thanks,
Malcolm Fraser, InnovaCorp in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Great, thanks. So yes, absolutely. In fact, Michael and I were just talking about PRI quite a bit about 10 hours ago. So
Okay,
and we would certainly any input and suggestions as we move forward, and that will be part of the documentation here, is to identify those other systems and structures out there that we want to be interacting with. So thanks for that. Other comments?
May I briefly intervene?
Sure.
Thank you. So I think this is exciting and helpful work. And I have two comments. Number one, we should be very clear with regard to what we are aiming for. What is the output that we're looking for, and who do we want to reach with the work product that this group will produce? Of course, there's a big general public, but it's very important to think through who is our model reader and model recipient of this messaging. And my second comment is with regard to other if not reporting, at least benchmarking tools. And the one that is really coming to the top of the agenda from a European point of view is, of course, the European Union taxonomy. And the things that is interesting with that is that it is being shaped and created as we speak. For 6 clear segments that will be addressed. They've done 2, and in the remaining 4, you will find, for instance, seafood industry, which is where I'm particularly active. And we see that there are amendments and changes being made, and input to the European Union taxonomy work is going to be extremely important, because they are unusually transparent and unusually open about that they may not get it right the first time. And we've already seen that they have made changes in their first 2 segment proposals after input from groups like us and others. So this is really an open door. And why is this important on the global level? Well, the European taxonomy on sustainability, or taxonomy alignment, is a way to try to make green, in quotation mark, more measurable. And we see how it's impacting the financial markets and the financial sector, particularly investors that invest for others, but that seeps into investors that invest for themselves as well. And this means that I expect that there will be substantial EU taxonomy creep, as it were, to other parts of the world. Thank you.
Can I add something? This is really
Please.
good to hear about this work and would love to hear more about what's happening, because for a number of other industry initiatives, whether they started in solar or in agriculture or any of the other places, when the focus is on finding common language that all investors can speak, sometimes it ends up being the least common denominator that everybody understands, which may or may not be relevant to the sector. So it's really wonderful to hear you all are there. And just to re-emphasize the importance of taxonomy, I think that'll go a long way in making sure we stay focused to what's relevant for us and meaningful also.
Thanks very much, Shali and Monica. Other comments at this stage?
I might do one follow-up. It's Ted from Investable Oceans. One follow-up to the really good points that were just made on the target audience. We've talked some about in previous meetings about the difference between institutional investors and sort of the private markets or things that are sort of smaller companies in general. And I do think that that question about, are you heading more towards a, quote, ESG input or more towards an impact? So if you're an investment manager at this point of any, after you've got 5 or 10 billion under management, you've got a structure to your ESG world already. And you've got either MSCI or Sustainalytics, you've got Bloomberg or Reuters or CDP, whoever, but there's a real channeling that goes on and those grooves are getting reasonably deep, although it's under all kinds of flux as well. So I just am echoing that first point about, really thinking about who's going to use it for what purposes, and is the interface set up for them to accept that information and integrate it into their investment process. I think that's great scoping work for that first element that you talked about, sort of getting your arms around the whole thing.
Just wanted to make a quick comment. From what I remember a few months ago when we first started to talk about the ESG task force, and this conversation came up around, is it focused solely on public markets or also on impact investing? Is it both? Is it one or the other? There seemed to be, at least at the time, to my recollection, the interest in doing both a resource for public markets investors and also for impact investors. So I think that would merit revisiting, but at least at that time, there was interest in doing both, whether as part of the same group or two separate groups, still to be determined.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm Lena Konstantinovic, founding partner in BBC Fund and founder and CEO of Innovation 4.4.
Thanks. These are great comments. Other thoughts, and certainly a big agenda item here moving forward is target audience and fit for purpose for that target audience and the outputs. Yeah.
If I may, Paul, Nicolas switching from Lafarge Olsen speaking. If I may, one comment on the target audience, Paul, is I wonder if you want to associate into this technology provider, solution provider, contractors, material provider like us. I mean, I happen to be involved, for example, on the taxonomy topics for the EU in energy. And they associate a lot the technology provider and the solution provider, because in a way, in my understanding, it's very important to agree, and that was said before on the standard and the taxonomy, but also to assess what is possible and what is the cost, because things are evolving, things are changing. There are things that are probably not that difficult to finance, or I would say that wouldn't add a big cost to the society, and that could have a big impact. And on the reverse, there could be things that are extremely expensive and difficult to implement. So that's, yeah, it's really an open question for you, and it depends which angle you want to take. But just when I look at the target audience at the end of your slideware, etc., I was wondering, do you want only to have finance, let's say, driven and investor people, or do you want also to associate, let's call it solution providers, and not talking only about us? I mean, there are a lot of.
Sure, and I think that's an important part of the discussion here, is in terms of the, the engaging of the investee basically the corporate community that would be the partner in the investments or the recipient of the investments. So certainly as a kind of a reality check, as you say, and in terms of financial viability or economic viability of some of the approaches and tools, and certainly in understanding the issues as we get into the next set of slides here. What are the understanding that the structure of the ocean business community, as well as the issues and impacts that each of those different sectors create on the ocean and the potential to be addressing them. If there's no other comments, Michael, you're looking like you want to say something, but you're on mute.
Yeah, hi, Paul. Thank you. It's Mike Vanika from Inspire Impact here in Sydney. Just a couple of comments around everyone else's points there. I think we're to the point made about public markets. I think we're looking both at public and private markets for both ESG and impact. We run impact funds in listed equities here in Sydney, and so do cover those public markets. And I guess, we currently use MSCI as a tool and looking at the ISS product as a tool, and they cover both impact and ESG in the way that they analyze companies, typically looking at the revenues of companies that are contributing to the SDGs as the impact component, but then cover off the range of measures in and around ES and G. The other point I just wanted to make around organizations and the GIN, in the impact world, there's the Impact Management Project that's gained a lot of traction, and they've developed not a taxonomy, but the key 5 dimensions of which to measure impact. So I think that would be interesting to bring in as well. Yeah, so I think those are probably some ways that we can glue this whole thing together. And I think the point is well made around both investee and investor perspectives to it as well, and the depth of where you're gathering the data. So whether it's from an SME as an investee all the way up into an institution, that creates a lot of complexity, and I suspect there might need to be some kind of trade-offs at some point. But I think on the ESG factors, those are getting ironed out fairly well. I think on the impact management projects and the impact, the core impact of the different sectors within the oceans, I think that still there's quite a lot of work to be done there. All right, that's it for me.
Thanks, Michael. And I think we're getting some good clarity on what the work is in front of us and the priorities we need to and pathways we need to pursue in that work. I just mentioned, leave Monica on in terms of the EU taxonomy. Our colleague Ruben Eiders from Portugal is not here, but he would have been supporting you heartily in that, because he pretty much brings up the EU taxonomy every roundtable to remind us of it, which is important. And in fact, we've been looking to identify someone to come speak to the roundtable about the EU taxonomy. So maybe offline, if you have a particular thought on that, and I'll check with Ruben as well to get them to speak to us. So moving forward here, sorry, someone jumping in? Moving forward then, in terms of the scope, and this relates to the sort of things we've just been talking about, and this a bit on terminology with ESG and impact investing, and the discussion now about private versus public entities as the target, and also I guess you would say the scale maybe of the target audience in terms of institutional investors or smaller entities. Just looking at my notes here. So this is the kind of the overall context of the outline of the sorts of things that we've and again, thanks Michael very much for all your input into developing this outline. any thoughts on what we've got here with the sort of laying out the structure for where we want to go at things? And I'll just jump ahead to give you a sense of the next piece here and the structure, so that what we're talking about here is, you know, where it applies and what sort of scope of coverage, and that this gets back to the initial comment we started with, and the PRI, Malcolm, as you brought up, and so on, that we want to make sure we're covering. So just to get, and at this stage of the process and in today's session, it's really to help get all of your feedback in, and then and take this to the next level of detail, and really, as we've talked about, get this task force sort of moving based on the input from everyone. So I'll just open the floor for any thoughts on this slide and the next, in terms of the overall structure here that really follows on from the comments we've just had. And I know I'll not to be putting anyone on the spot, but I know, Rafa, that you have been working on this sort of framework development from your side, which is why we were so happy to make contact with each other. I don't know if from your experience you've got any thoughts on what we're outlining here. And then I'd also, you know, Ted, you and Michael both mentioned MSCI, and just your thoughts on whether those sort of analytical tools and entities that are out there in a very much commercial sector, how they relate to this sort of effort.
Well, yes, I agree actually with what has been said. In particular, we should think about who we want to read it at the end, and what should be the output, and to get a very broad basis, I would really suggest to see at first what is there, how it is used in the particular different organizations in the EU, but also in the impact measurement space. And I agree that there is a lot of work in particular in that regard, and that would be the first step, I would say. And then the challenge will also be to find out which sub-industries we want to target. And indeed, then, well, one way could be that we come up really as maybe as at the end as the framework that also really fits into the others, but maybe also we have the resources to really set also a standard here, maybe that the others can then look into what this group thinks is good. And regarding the different asset classes, I also think that it's important to get an overall agreement on it. But there are some particularities, I think, in the private equity space compared to the listed equities, whereas the metrics can be similar to measure impact, for example. But I see a bit of challenge there. But yeah, my 2 cents.
Thanks, Rafa. Very valuable 2 cents. Other comments on this overall sort of outline or framework for the framework work efforts?
Paul, if I may, I think that the comment with regard to private equity is very valid. I work with a number of private equity funds that are either invested in or plan on invest in agricultural or seafood related industries. And it's interesting to see that stakeholders that used to be laggards now have become leaders. And why is that? Look at private equity. They are looking to go in, create a platform company, and exit within the time of, say, to simplistically, to be accurate, but bear with me, between 5 to 8, max 10 years, they want to exit. That has made private equity, in my experience, the last 2 years, in many ways, thought leaders and implementers of sustainability, because they have to make their companies not only future-proof, but exit-proof, realizing that your investment, your portfolio company, will have to look attractive to a future buyer 5 or 8 years down the line. And when you look at it that way, you just know that you have to up the game on sustainability. And add that to the fact that there is many more growth platforms in ocean-related industries than in many onshore-related industries. This is really the right space to harness the power of private equity and other very driven owners. It's a lot to be said for long-term ownership, but sometimes they have too much time and become too long-term in implementing change. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lubanik. And in fact, Michael and I were having a very active discussion on this too, also in the sense that the private ownership, the availability of data and the, I'd say openness or exposure to public opinion and public shareholders and so on creates a bit of a challenge. And whether some of the others around the table here have any thoughts on how well this kind of framework in general, but particularly for the ocean industries, will be able to shape and influence behavior in the sense of an investor applying a set of criteria and metrics to a privately held company that's not, got public data requirements or exposure to that kind of public process.
I just wanted to share a thought. I think your question really depends on the quality of the work that the group that gets together to do is able to put out, and I think that'll affect adoption and utility. I think what might be helpful, rather than or in addition to, I should say, the more philosophical conversations about ESG and the potential, is to give some specificity to the structure for the group that's interested in working on this, to come together in very particular ways, particularly for those who are new today and may not have a sense of that. I think it would be useful to indicate what the intention is, how this group will gather, what's the time frame for engagement, what's the level of output for those who may be interested to opt in, and then to go through the process of in the design phase, engaging in those very specific questions around implementation, rather than the more philosophical and theoretical conversation that might fast track some of the process around implementing this. So my suggestion would be, this is a great high-level conversation for the entire roundtable on investing. And I'm guessing there's a subset of us who are really interested in the ESG framework, and others may be less relevant to their work directly. So I'm just curious from you, Paul, what your vision is for the task force specifically, what timeline you have in mind, if you do, and how those who are interested in participating can opt in, and what does opting in mean specifically?
Very good, very helpful. Very helpful, Lena. So let's maybe, if I just want to jump forward here just to get a sense of, and if people have the document on their own available, to hopefully have had a chance to look at it, to get a sense of what the, sorry to be jumping around here on the slides, what were the scope of things here. And so let's take a sidebar discussion now then on that, while it's front of mind for you and hopefully others, to pick up this, which we may have gotten to or would have wanted to get to at the end, but to make sure we've got the time to to really set the stage for moving forward. Lena, if I could put that back to you then to say, what's your sense, you know, and others then to jump in, you know, what's your sense of the work of, let's just call it the task force here, of a smaller group of people that want to participate in this, for those of you that are interested in being more diving in deeper on this work with a real focused task force group here. What's your sense, Lena and others, of what that what the mechanics, the operational development of that group looks like? And I and the World Ocean Council are here to facilitate that and work with those of you that the Coalition of the Willing that's ready to gather as often and as you feel valuable and appropriate, and really move this along.
Sure, and just based on similar initiatives in the past around designing standards and so on, what I would suggest an initial kickoff meeting with those who are interested, with a minimum commitment for the next year to gather in that initial meeting. The group can decide whether it's once a month, every other week, whatever frequency is of interest and makes sense for the participants, and then to set, you know, a meaningful enough time frame for each of those meetings, let's say 2 hours, to really have the chance to delve deeper into the work, and then go from there. So I think that kind of structure just begins to set up something that you know, that other participants can buy into or not. So I would suggest a kickoff meeting within the next couple of weeks, or as soon as one can get scheduled with the interested parties.
Yeah.
And then from there, building out the structure for engagement based on participant interest.
Okay. Thoughts on that from others?
I think great idea, and yeah, really to have a working group of people who are really keen to make this happen, to roll up the sleeves a bit, would be a great idea. And then we can certainly touch base, maybe with this group and the broader group. We've got connections into GIN and the EU taxonomy and the PRI, just to say this is what we're doing, this is how we're thinking about it in the initial comments, but then to get into the real work. And we can always feed back into this broader group and saying this is what's coming through, any comments, and refine it that way. But it makes a lot of sense what Lena's saying.
Yep, and that's certainly been the aspiration or intention. It's largely been to get that smaller working group going. It's just really been a kind of a secretariat kind of prioritization. But let's, from my side, make a commitment to get a note back to all the roundtable participants, proposing with a doodle poll to get a date picked by the middle of next month, which starts in 3 days. By middle of April, we have that those that want to opt in, as you say, to meet and get the ball rolling in a more focused way. Any other thoughts on the sort of the logistics and process there that Lena's raised?
I think it's a great idea. I think we're gonna have to think through sooner rather than later on this question of expertise. You have UNFFI on there, and I think a number of us were on that working group, and they had a formidable group of people that were very good at very specific things and very deep on it. And one of the challenges of the ocean economy, blue economy, however you frame it, is it's very diverse. It's you know, offshore wind is different than fish, or different than plastics, or different than tech. I mean, there's a Venn diagram there, but there's some material differences. So they're different in and of themselves, and then they're also distributed and embedded within a wide variety of companies. So I do think that as you assemble an initial team, to think very early on about, you know, from a scoping perspective, are you going to try and cover the whole ocean, the whole proverbial waterfront? And if so, to start thinking about getting deep enough on the experts in specific areas.
Right. Thanks, Ted.
Was that where we bring in sort of other people into it for specific expertise within certain sectors within the ocean? Is that what you're saying, Ted?
Yeah, so I think we all come from different backgrounds. We all grew up with certain things and have certain areas that we're comfortable in. But if you're going to start to think about what the word materiality pops up a lot in this presentation, as it should, and certainly in the work of the raters and the other folks who are talking about. But as you get more specific about those areas, in addition to general investment expertise, people really know on the fisheries side what's what, and that will show up in the data sets also. Like in a perfect world, MSCI covers whatever 6,000 or 7,000 companies, and if you aggregate the top 4 or 5 of the raters, you'll get to 9,000 or 10,000 of global coverage. But then if you look at a deep dive like what Collar Fair just put out or what Planet Tracker does, they're dealing with a couple of dozen companies or 100 companies, let's say, for just to do the edges of the box, but they go really, really deep. And so to have that conversation, have that vision around what you're constructing, my point is, that fairly early on, you want to start thinking about, if you're going to think about shipping and ports and harbors and fisheries and aquaculture, et cetera, what's the SME content that you need to think through, like what that structure would look like in those verticals? I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, yeah, I think so for sure. And
it's a fascinating question, and it is. I agree with Paul and Michael that it's not been done. It would be a real service, and it's a big task depending on how you scope it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just to put that in a bit of a context here, and we may want to put together a diagram on this. Over the years, what I've been seeing, and when this emerged from the roundtable, really resonated with the kind of the gap in the middle there that I see is that there's the sector-specific stuff that's going on for different of the ocean industries to one degree or another, with shipping, for example, and certainly fisheries and sustainable fisheries for a long time now, and then somewhat more recently with aquaculture. And then there's the higher levels, broader efforts overall for corporate responsibility and ESG, et cetera. But the middle piece is that ocean cross-cutting piece that was the gap that emerged from the roundtable and was really the gap that had been occurring to me over the last number of years. And I don't know if that captures the kind of the structure of things, that the framework of things that you all just been articulating in the last number of interventions. But it seems, and I want to be sure that anything we're doing here, we're not from the WOC side wanting to create work that's not necessary. This really emerged from all of you around the table, and so we want to make sure and regularly check back to make sure we are providing added value and addressing a need. So I would suggest we anyone jump in at any point, but I'll keep working through the material we've got for any input here, and really taking to heart that we need to move forward with what we've been saying for the last several months, as Lena really drew a fine point on. Let's get that those together that want to opt in and get to work. So we'll look at these the content that has been outlined here, just to see if there's any guidance or suggestions, red flags from any of you, as we then move quickly into that task team approach. So this is really outlining some of the again, a part of the scoping, looking at the consideration of the sorts of strategies and the country's asset classes and sectors. A part of this is then, and I think this is captured a bit further on here, in terms of understanding, who are all the sectors that are involved, and what are the specific issues and problems that are involved with those sectors. And a big part of this is that cross-cutting level of issues that are about the ocean and impacts on the ocean that are common to several, if not all, ocean operators. So, any thoughts on the content here?
Paul, without wanting to complicate things further, but might there be some value in actually inviting in groups who might not be part of this forum, this roundtable, and not connected to the ocean? And I'm thinking someone like one of the data providers, whether it's MSCI or ISS, or they're already trying to think about these things and would be covering shipping and oceans in some forms, in some sectors, but to get them to come in on this as well. And then obviously they can take it back into their organizations and provide some feedback.
Sure. I mean, it's really what you all, as we're here to facilitate what you all feel would be the best way forward. So any thoughts on that, and who those, you've mentioned MSCI and ISS, others, and I guess also one of the things that's occurred to me, and I've been wanting to reach out to MSCI for a number of months, whether there's any concerns about them as commercial operators and what they do that might be, well, I mean, they'll share only what they feel appropriate to share, but whether we want to make sure that we are well organized and positioned to be able to present what we want to do, I think, to a certain level of surety, so that we're not opening up the opportunity for someone to kind of take what we're doing and run with it before we've gotten ourselves very well organized. I don't know if that's a valid concern, but it's kind of been in the back of my mind before reaching out to some of those very actively commercial operations that are in this space. Thoughts on Michael's suggestion there, from those of you that know and work with those sort of organizations?
It'd be great to learn more from them. Absolutely.
Any other institutions other than the two that Michael mentioned that fall into that that category?
Well, I was working with Robicosem on developing the ESG rating for sectors. In particular, I was working on aquaculture, and this rating has been sold to S&P. I have still good contacts to that organization, and so I can also try to get feedback. But it's sector based, and this might be a challenge, as also Ted mentioned, for our framework. And at the same time, I also think, like you, Paul, that we maybe also set up the frame first before we reach out, so that we also can get the best out of it, what we want to look for.
Thanks, Rafa. That's both in terms of who else is out there, and I did reach out to Robeco a number of years ago as we were getting going with our ocean investment platform. And I think that's part of a bit of a for the TAS team, a bit of a mapping exercise in terms of what the landscape is out there. What are the other standards out there for key ocean sectors and sustainability, and making sure we're aware of what building blocks, both in terms of metrics and in terms of organizations that are out there, and then, as several of you have said, then reaching out to those other entities to engage them here in this, what's really a pretty competitive collaborative platform here. Okay. And I think the just in terms of the content here, the part of the play here will be in terms of hitting that sweet spot of not being too generic, but also building on the sector specific pieces to create something that's, as I say, that I think we're really identifying that there's this sort of middle ground about the ocean scale issues that are not exactly sector specific, but they're not broad sustainability level conditions and metrics that we're talking about. Michael, I don't know if you wanted to present anything on this as part of that broader context, or if we, so up to you. I know you had included this as part of the background.
Yeah, it was just the different investment styles, and the key one I think is you kind of got exclusions, those that are doing exclusions regarding their portfolios. ESG integration is really around risk management, is the one that's on the far left-hand side, of then impact investing that's looking at that impact. But I think those are the three major styles of investing. But I think that was just to say that these are some of the things that are going on in the responsible investment movement, which I'm certainly involved in. So
yeah,
just to leave it at that. Yeah, people can look at that framework, get their heads around it in their own time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So in terms of the impact measurement, the part of the work here and what I'm seeing in the different frameworks that have emerged from different companies is that there's a kind of a taxonomy that different of you and your peers have developed as different funds have gotten started and set up to both identify who are the sectors and subsectors and what are the sort of impacts or problems that are emanating from their activities that then lead to a discussion of what are the solutions and then what are the investment opportunities, and that sort of logic flow from sector and subsector to problem or issue to solution to investment. And so that, I think, would be a big part of what the task force is working on, again, particularly to look then at the cross-cutting issues that are applicable to numerous sectors or subsectors, and that seems to be where the opportunity really lies in terms of sorting out the framework here. Any thoughts or comments on what we've got here? This point about, and I think this relates to a bit of what Nicola was bringing up in terms of what's really investable, both from the point of view of the corporate entities and the investor. Those of you that, well, all of you that are around the table here, that this is the role of the organizations and your efforts that you're involved in. Any thoughts on what kind of how we might, what sort of metrics or criteria really can be developed to address this aspect?
One of the ways that might be useful to look at this, I was on a panel recently with the folks who developed the science-based targets, and it was a sustainable brands panel. So many of the corporate entities who are members, which is several thousand, are adopting science-based targets to develop their CSR strategies from and metrics specifically. So perhaps aligning with science-based targets and looking at what part of that pertains to the oceans, and then setting some science-based targets that are the guiding principles, or that at least give some indication as to where the most, what are the most impactful elements to measure in any project or initiative. That may be one way to align, obviously, both with the SDGs, but then with science-based targets around where the most impactful interventions are and what should be measured to work towards those outcomes in those most impactful areas.
Yeah. Any thoughts on Lena's input there? I've been tracking following the science-based targets effort, and that's really emanating out of course, the climate change discussions, and very much a part of what's covered at the UNFCCC COPs each year. And it seems like they're starting to branch out from just climate to, if I recall correctly, maybe ecosystem or biodiversity areas. And may be that a part of the value of what we're doing here is to really then identify the priorities for those more multi-stakeholder efforts to identify the science-based targets for things that aren't getting specifically addressed, but need to be in what we're doing here. So, for example, biofouling and the spread of invasive species. What is this specific science-based target that would be applicable to a whole range of industries to tackle that issue, and be able to be measured against efforts and commitments to tackle that issue. So this may be, as we get into more detail, this may be a key part of what we can bring to the international community to say, okay, here's where there needs to be a collective multi-stakeholder effort to identify targets for companies in this particular area that then the investors can use as a metric moving forward, and then that weaves into the overall framework here.
If I may.
Oh, just to quickly add, the reason I brought it up is because they are expanding into ocean specifically. And so there may be, it's the right timing to perhaps consider a collaboration, and happy to introduce you to the founder. So I think that's a very aligned effort that could inform this process in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Lena, if you could do that. I think, Liv, Monica, you wanted to jump in?
Sure, thank you. I think Lena has some extremely valid points. Thank you for bringing that in. And I think that we need to deepen our rationale from identify problems to identify solutions over to harnessing the commercial drivers, and the power of sustainability integral to business strategy is exactly that. It integrates sustainability into business strategy. Then that's when it really has a really strong impact. And I think we can add some, not only language, but examples. And let me just name one. Before the corporate social responsibility agenda was all about the company itself. How do you do? Do you do any harm? Are you doing any good in the business you do? But it was never put properly into context of community. And that's what I think sustainability, SDGs, and indeed the taxonomy gives us. It is it compels us to see each company as part of a community. That's when we get new questions asked from stakeholders, shareholders, employees, etc., markets as well, to us as business industry players, when we're being asked, how do you help others reach their sustainability objectives? And that's the new twist, where you are not only an island of your own, but you're always being asked, how do you deal with your supply chain? How do you make your customers more able to meet their sustainability goals? And I think that whole value chain really supports how this can be commercial. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Monica. That's really helping to, I think, focus us and drive us forward here. Let's just conscious of time here, and so moving into really the some of the suggestions and outline of real measures then, and how to structure those measures. This is the real getting into the real meat of what we can work on. Then we'll work on through the with the task team. Any thoughts on this and the sort of metrics that are being proposed here, just to give us some initial overall feedback, and really appreciate this general discussion. But as we were clear on, we need to really sit down and get into a very, very structured, systematic level of work on this with a core group. One of the, Nicola, I can't see everybody who's here. If you're still here, from a company perspective, and I'm not sure Nicola's still here, or others, in terms of having a kind of a pilot or testing the metrics, any thoughts on, as we get a sort of a working version of metrics developed? To me, it seems like it would be valuable to have some companies that, those that are WOC members, for example, potentially, or others that would be willing to serve as sort of guinea pigs, pilot demonstration projects to apply and test out the metrics. Any thoughts on or experience on analogous situations that could help guide us from anyone around the table? No? Okay. Well, this is what we'll use this as a jumping off point for the task team. Any metrics in here that really strike people as needing particular focus, or things that we're missing that you really thought would have been on this even very initial startup list that you're not seeing? Okay, we'll move. I think and this was then taking this to the next level of an outline of some examples of particular kinds of big level issues, top order level issues, and the kinds of metrics that might be applied both in terms of implementing solutions and reducing impacts.
I think on the previous slide, there's quite a few social impact parameters that are not included, that there may be some utility into spending some more time on that. I mean, there's a whole number that I can think of. So happy in whatever structure that's appropriate, work on expanding that from the 4 bullet points that are there. There are probably at least 7, 8 that are worth including, and potentially more. Yeah,
and those would be coming from, I imagine, organizations that have worked on those issues in relation to perhaps completely non-ocean sectors, but these are the kinds of social issues that need to be taken into consideration by a company, whether it's an ocean-related one or not.
Right. So when I worked on the set of metrics for wealth management, so in the social we had, for example, things like CEO to average worker pay that could be either on the governance or social side, women on the board, maternity, paternity leave, those kinds of metrics that could be encompassed there as well.
Mm-hmm. And for some of these things, you know, there may be not just the social, but for some sets of issues, we may be able to just reference and link to an existing system or structure or package that handles those for corporate entities and provides the content and the metrics, so that we certainly don't want to be reinventing or feeling like we need to reposition some sets of issues and metrics that are already well developed. So that's part of that, understanding the landscape.
The National Labor Organization standards, Paul, right?
Right. And then there's, in my work on standards and certification over a decade or more ago, things like organizations like Social Accountability International and others that work with the garment industry and others that have focused a lot of attention on social issues that provide voluntary standards and certification. So we've got a lot we can draw on there.
Yeah, especially some of the parameters like prison labor, extractive, for-profit, prison companies, and so on. There's a broader set of, depending on the sector the company is in, of social opportunities to hold the company accountable around certain social metrics.
Yeah. I just realized there's a number of comments in the chat room, which I haven't. This is always when I'm sharing these things, I always forget to keep checking the chat. So I'll just have a quick look there.
Yeah, and someone brought up the indigenous issue, so we've done some work around that, how to assess whether the company has a positive impact on indigenous communities or an extractive one, and so on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there could be on certain sectors then specific. For example, on the environmental side, in the aquaculture, there would be then certain impacts metrics that came to my mind, or certain environmental governance on the operational side, on the ESG side. Perhaps we can do some sector specific things, and then, but also in general, things that apply to all. And yeah, I think that that would be great.
Yeah, so I think that's the real purpose and challenge here is where is that balance between that middle ground again, between having an ocean lens on all of this that builds on the sectoral level and builds down from the broader sets of metrics and frameworks that are out there. Okay, I think we are, so that's, before we just jump to that last point then, on plans for this year. Thank you all for participating in this very broad discussion around the project, around the Ocean ESG Impact Framework development. We will proceed as we have been wanting to, and again, Lena and others have really helped draw us to a fine focus here on let's get the task team going. Based on today's discussion, any other guidance, suggestions on the process here and the task team? I won't ask for right now for a show of hands, but we'll send a follow-up email so that people can opt in, and we'll get a poll sent out to identify a time, knowing that we've got this mix of time zones with some of you being up very late now in Europe and Michael being very, very early riser in Australia. So any other guidance or suggestions moving forward here on the process? Okay, we'll get that note out to everyone, and if there are other institutions or organizations that work that we need to take into account, in addition to the very good points that came up today, please don't hesitate to send me a note. Just a last short point here on the, we still have the hope and aspiration to moving forward as we proposed late last year with a global blue finance summit, Bluefin event, really building on the Sustainable Ocean Summit focus in 2019, late 2019 on finance and investment and innovation. Had a lot of good momentum, including this roundtable that emerged out of that, a lot of good feedback on that, a lot of supportive comments on the idea of having a blue finance focused event, and have discussions going on about how to combine or collaborate with others on that, as really a wanting to weave together the strength of collaboration and diversity in efforts, and we did. So we have put this out there as something we hope to be able to pull together this year, with potentially this very broad and inclusive scope that we worked to address in the Sustainable Ocean Summit in 2019. We may need to to work to narrow this down, and I'll be continuing the discussions with those of you that we've started to talk about how we might combine efforts here. But happy to have any feedback now or as we move forward, and still waiting to see what the pandemic and international travel landscape is going to look like moving forward. And we do want to not duplicate efforts, but work with others to collaborate on something like this. So any thoughts or input on this? And in addition, we're also in a waiting pattern on the overall Sustainable Ocean Summit planning for this year. Again, hoping that the overall landscape for people to move around will improve enough to have a physical event, if possible. Okay, well, with that, thanks everyone for your input, and I'll be getting back to the overall roundtable mailing list, which is at I think we've got 80 or so on that mailing list, to then see what the level of interest is in then participating in the task team. Several people have already identified that they're keen to get involved in that and start working at that more detailed level. And hopefully, those of you on the call today are interested to respond to that, and we'll get focused and be able to report back to the overall monthly roundtable meeting as we make progress. If there's any closing comments, otherwise we'll go ahead and wrap up then. Great. Well, thanks everyone, and thank you, Michael, for all the effort you put in. And we'll be back in touch by email with the planning for the task team gathering.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
Bye
you
for
very
now.
much.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for being here, Fred. Did you want to touch base on anything quickly while we're online here?
I'm trying to get the the business plan and the legal things going forward. So, you know, I need to reach out to Alan and Daniel to see if I could get some more specifics on, you know, their models and some of the data from the mangroves. If I can, that was Ed's idea. You know, but all this is fitting together and, you know, trying to move it forward.